June the 1st, 2023. Oh my goodness. Dana, welcome everybody. Hope you had a great day. Because I certainly didn't. I got caught in northeaster winds today. Had to punch my way home at a quarter power. I'm not sad it's the fifth day of the week, fifth show of the week. It's going to take a couple days just to recover from that ordeal. But nothing is too much when it comes to nuclear. My goodness, you're an evil lot. That's pretty evident in the poll we got tonight. It's a pretty simple poll, hard to screw that up. Has the nuclear industry betrayed humanity and the 8 million species? Call in or text, give us your thoughts. 709-589-4406. Don't be shy. Leave your voice so the world knew you existed. Think about that. It's a great platform. You spoke out against nuclear. I denounce nuclear. Text me, call me. I denounce nuclear. Say it with your soul. Because eventually you'll wish you did. We got a lot of just nuclear being nuclear to get through tonight. Raphael Grossi can't wait to get to hell, I bet you. He'll be at home finally. How about that censorship last night on over the last 24 hours, my last video, which was a great video. I thought I'd done pretty good. Apparently I didn't. 130 views or something. So if you work for 10 years plus, like I'm doing, telling this story, in major presentations, see if you can pin the tail on the real reactor. So just put your blindfold on. You can stare at the picture for 3 minutes, and then you can put your blindfold on and pin the tail on the picture of the real reactor 4. You're like, Dana, that's impossible. 3 minutes? You really expect me to remember that in 3 minutes? We should have a contest, shouldn't we? Count the tanks at Fukushima. Even TEPCO won't be able to get it right. TEPCO, like, I don't know anymore. Some says it's 1,000, some say it's 750. I only got 750 because they counted all the small tanks. I was feeling generous that day, and so. How many dirty bombs does it take to blow up a country? How many suicide bombers does it take to equal one of those death machines? They only fire dirty bombs, depleted uranium, low-level radioactive material. That's what they fire. They don't fire nothing else. These are dirty bombs. These dirty bombs shoots 1.5 tons a minute. And the Gulf War, they estimated was he admitted to 700 tons of these dirty bombs being used. And a physicist from Japan at a conference in Hamburg in Germany calculated it was equal to 44,000 Hiroshima and Nagasaki worth of radiation, low level, and that's compared to lethal, immediately deadly doses. Still deadly, but it could take a couple of decades to manifest and get diagnosed. Let's ask the journalist. Just kidding, yeah. I'm just kidding. Don't go getting upset with me. I'm just kidding. Fukushima Reactor 3 and Fukushima Reactor 4. We should use that for like assisted dying. Instead of all these chemicals, they could just walk past one of these suckers. Data, are you serious? No, I'm just. It's just a dime for the people in the nuclear industry. How about that? Will you give me that? Which one of the people to the right who's claiming they're in the fuel pool at the top of the building to the left is the biggest douchebag? Yeah. Jeez, imagine if you had to judge that contest. I don't know, CNN's pretty scumbag, and ABC, well, Seth Dorn, Rupert Winfield Hayes, they're in that building. They're magic because that's the building up there at the very top of that falling back down. That's the actual building we're talking about. No, I'm sorry, that's reactor 4. This is reactor 3. Oh, there it is over there. Look at that. 27 days later, covers the entire planet. So now we got a whole bunch of Superman and Spider-Man and Hulks, Dana. How can that be a bad thing? You must be a journalist. These were dark times, weren't they? It's a tsunami coming. There's multiple tsunamis. Multiple tsunamis. By the way, consider liking and subscribing and click that notification bell so Google knows to block you. Google can't block you if they don't know who you are. Even scumbags got to make a living, you know. Japan crews facing a 100-year battle at Fukushima. Well, let's volunteer all the nuclear students and academics. Let's give them a hand. There's only 50 of them. I think there's been around 20,000 sets of Fukushima 50s or something like that. Why is it whenever I do a show, I'm more thirstier than I was the last show? How does that work? My goodness, this must have been hell, eh? This is just somewhere enough hours, a few hours. The first, I don't know, it could be the first day or two, really. Does that look like hell or does that look like hell? Is that a dark freaking place or am I missing something? Let's zoom in a little bit. Well, at least it's easy to stay warm with all those fires, right? Dada, that's not funny. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just saying there's lots of fires to keep you warm. After getting hit by tsunami waves at 400 and 500 mile per hour. And they keep progressing farther in the country. It ripped out 1,300 miles of the country. There's 2,000 square miles of debris in the Pacific. All of it was covered with radioactive fallout. That's life, right? Explosion heard at Japan's nuclear plant. Let's go backwards for a second, actually. Let's go back to 2011. Just entertain me. It's been a rather trying day. Let's go back to high possibility of a meltdown for Reactor 1. This was on March the 12th. This is the day after the tsunami. Explosion heard. Explosion. Maybe I can even show it to you. Can we really do fancy shit like this that day, Dana? I don't know. Bear with me. Just give me a minute. Give me a minute. Let me see if I can find that. I probably can't find that because it's Thursday. Yeah, the Atlantic Ocean can go from so nice, just amazing, gorgeous, to holy shit, this is brutal. in just a matter of, oh, lucky me. Okay, we're done. I apologize for not having everything pre-ready. No, that's not what we wanted. Well, we will in a minute, but not right now. This is the explosion of number 1, high possibility of a meltdown. This ejected the fuel pool out of the building. And that's reactor 3. Let me see if I can find reactor 1. That's okay, I done it backwards. We need that anyway, so. Is this it? What are you waiting for? Oh, yeah, this is from 30 miles away from a security camera. let me speed this up. I forgot I had that to 25%. Okay. That's reactor 1. That was the 12th. Let's do that again. That's pretty fast, right? Let me zoom in a bit. Boom. Does that look like an explosion? Now that's that building. So look at the building. These buildings are 190 feet tall, 150 feet wide. The stack to your left in the center of the screen, the building is right to the right of it. And so it was there and then it's not. It's gone, basically, because the explosion is so... Now, that's the fuel pools. And so officially, that explosion just blew the walls out. It didn't do that. The official story is it did not do that. It blew the walls out. Seen a whale today. It was just when I turned around to run away because the wind had changed on me. Because then you're getting it from the northeast Atlantic Ocean. It's a direct, it's 5,000 miles across to Ireland and Scotland and the United Kingdom. It's coming straight in, right? So it gathers up steam pretty quick. And I was on the lead land quite a ways away. And when I came around the point, bam! Oh, crap. This is going to be nasty. I got some videos at the end for you. This is reactor 3. There's the fuel pool coming down. They pretended they were in those fuel pools later on. TEPCO officials says meltdown likely underway at a second nuclear reactor, March the 12th. March the 12th. This is the day after the earthquake, the tsunami. TEPCO reports fuel rods at number 2 reactor. Number 2 reactor is the only one that it looks like it's intact. Let me show you 1 and 2, actually, because we didn't do. That's what 1 looked like after the explosion. That's reactor 3, Dan. That's what 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Oh, right there. So this is the explosion. Boom. Now what made all that debris, right? Because the buildings are 190 feet tall, 150 feet wide. So you can judge how big that debris field is right away. Okay, so that was the one you seen blow up. It ejected the fuel pools. It atomized them, basically, and aerosoled them. I guess that's not accurate for the most part. It turned them into fine particulates, fuel rod particulates. These are not hot particles, these are holy shit particles. That's reactor 2. Now, reactor 2 is the only one of the 4 reactors that lost each of these had 2 fuel pools at the top of them. Chernobyl never had no fuel pools. Three Mile Island never had no fuel pools. Santa Susana never had no fuel pools, but these were nasty, terrible, unbelievable accidents. Well, engineered genocide machines. Third reactor to Fukushima to have salt water injected. Number 2. You can't eject it. So when you talk about injected, they're talking about lowering the pressure of the containment vessel, which is at 1,000 plus pounds per square inch. So you got to lower that pressure to actually put something in there. But we know in hindsight, first off, you can't get near these reactors at that point. Zilch, zero, no possibility whatsoever. And that's March the 13th. That's day 3. You just had a tsunami rip your country apart. This is real. This is all around you. You're in the middle of all this. And so you're not injecting any salt water in because you just got pounded by a tsunami yourself. I'm going to have to take a day and just come back in and redo every one of my go-to panes, because my panes can have up to 10,000 pictures and depictions and stories in it, right? So how do you find everything? See, I do it by memory, because we've been doing it for so long. I know where most things, if not everything, is too. Third reactor, Fukushima, to have salt water injected, which was a total lie. You couldn't inject water into it. You can symbolically spray it at it, but the building doesn't exist anymore. You lost the inventories. In reactor 2, that went China syndrome right away. It burned continuously for several days. It liquefied. You've never seen a case in history where the reactor core liquefied. Explosion at Fukushima could only be caused by a meltdown. Exactly. So the fuel rod's got a coating of zirconium claddings, and inside the claddings are pellets of uranium, enriched uranium, and plutonium. Reactor 3 was military grade, highly enriched assay type uranium plutonium. This and it's known as mixed oxide fuel. And typical emissions from a plant, nuclear disease factors, I lovingly refer to them as, is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And so the mixed oxide fuel is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Really, really bad. And so the cladding, if it's exposed to oxygen, now cladding was the stuff you used to have in cameras in the 40s and 50s, and you had this little hammer would break the lens of the flash, and oxygen would rush in. And as soon as it feels oxygen, it ignites. And that's how they used to make the flash. So when this stuff loses water, it flashes. And because it's in a form where it's binded instead of powder like they were using, these were dirty bombs, these flashes, these cameras they were using, and the government and the nuclear industry knew it back then. These were dirty bombs. Wherever they use these flashes, that's a hot spot. People are probably still getting cancers and heart problems, liver problems, and lung problems from those areas where that stuff was deposited. So whenever you had the celebrities and everything back in the day, it was a bad spot to be. Explosion in Fukushima can only have been caused by a meltdown of reactor core. Same as your smoke detector. They're dirty bombs because you put americium-241 in your smoke detector. And so you say, well, it's a really tiny piece. Yeah, which would kill you if you ingested it, by the way. And if you put a Geiger counter, it would scream. Not only if you had a Geiger counter that can pick it up, that is, of course, because most Geiger counters can't pick that up. And when you're talking about billions of them, that are dirt cheap and are disposable every couple of years. So they don't have to store it for a million years. They put it in your incinerators and liberate it back into the environment, right? Explosion at Fukushima can only be caused by a meltdown of the reactor core, government agency. Zirconium cladding catches fire, burns at around 1800 degrees, ignites the plutonium uranium pellets. They burn at 9,000 degrees. That consumes the steel, the rebar, the cement, and everything else around it, and atomizes aerosols and ionizes and radiates it. Unless it gets jacked out of the building at the speed of light, so to speak. This is reactor 3 detonating. The explosion of that AP journalist, not Mari Yamaguchi, but the AP journalist felt that explosion 25 miles away. 4 nuclear reactors standing in a line are simultaneously spinning out of control. Fukushima will now be compared to Chernobyl. They fixed that. They just, worldwide, they decided to pretend that Chernobyl was worse than Fukushima, that a single reactor that was brand new, was mostly graphite. It's totally different than uranium plutonium. Whereas Japan's were pure uranium, pure plutonium, and they were 40 years old, and they had decades of reactor cores stored in pools at the top of the buildings. Chernobyl never had that. It was a new reactor. In Chernobyl, they closed 9,000 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. 9,000 farms. 9,400, actually. Around 400 are still closed today. 3,000 miles away. So you're supposed to abandon Europe because of Chernobyl. And studies have showed that the fallout changed the sex ratio of all the males and females in the country. More males than females, so which means less babies. And so you have to assume that's going to be true for birds and animals and insects because they're much more vulnerable, right? And so that's the betrayal. When you see me asking the betrayal question, has the nuclear industry betrayed humanity? That's what I'm alluding to. And there's so many vectors, the dumping in the ocean, the humiliating pollution of the biosphere for 80 years has compromised the future of the species, of all species. And the legacy, can humanity survive 80 years of radiation? That's a real important question. There's no good talking about it unless I find a way to articulate it, right? Let me see what I got for you. Stuffed up a bit here tonight. What the hell is that all about? Must be Poland or coal plants. Is that where I want to find that out? Right, perfect. Almost there. It's absurd how much I have. Oh. I know sometimes the stuff I don't use a lot. So like I usually can see words too when I go looking for it. I can physically see it. And so when I scroll through everything, I'll spot it. And I found that easier to train myself to do that than I did of all the vicious amount of work I got to do. I come back here. There. Let me just run you through what the hell is going on here. Radioactive cleanup at Idaho site. If you read that story, you're like, what the hell are they talking about? What a disaster. There's so many of these sites worldwide. These are Superfund sites, usually hundreds of square miles. It's complicated. Arriva Bay was after the Soviet Union collapsed, which was orchestrated. So everybody, when you think of the country collapsing, I think of a few things. I think of the patents of the country are dissolved, and the pensions of the country, for instance, are dissolved. And so you have now just destroyed the infrastructure of the country and the integrity of the country. It has no way. You break this bond. The country is built by the people, not the employees that call themselves the government. They're supposed to be your employees, but the minute they get the job, they're your enemy for some reason. La Hague reprocessing plants emissions, which La Hague is in France, and it has 500 security guards. 500 security guards. 500 security guards. But it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine, the emissions, right? But it has 500 security guards. And they make mixed oxide fuel by taking fuel from other countries, I might add, and boiling it in nitrous acid and liberating uranium, plutonium fission and reclaiming it in just absurd chemicals. And so you can't contain this. You can't. And they could, but they won't. They tried to, contain the gases, but it was ridiculous amount of storage necessary. So they just rewrote the laws and said we can release it and it's legal. That's what they've done in every instant of nuclear. And the emissions these emissions are this is serious stuff. And this is going to be here long past the human experience. Have contaminated the Arctic, for instance. Well, it can't contaminate the Arctic without contaminating Europe. And the Atlantics on both sides and the ocean itself. By proxy, then you got to be contaminating the entire planet. And these are all single incidences. This is all stillbirths among the offspring of male radiation workers. They do the same thing as La Hague in France, by the way. They're the biggest. They're the biggest nuclear site. They got building just absurd amount of buildings there. They don't even know what's in it anymore. They can never get inside of it. Stillbirths among offsprings of male radiation workers at Sellafield reprocessing plant. Stillbirths. Child cancers around a nuclear fuel reprocessing plant, mixed oxide sites at Sellafield. And so Columbia was having clusters of children with leukemia, clusters, which is right alongside these disease factories. And so a couple of academics wrote a study and said it was a common flu caused clusters of leukemia to protect the nuclear industry. You lost your way when you're willing to sacrifice all the species for your paycheck. You no longer are a human. You might think you are. You might have the material that most humans covet and everything else because you have a well-paying job, but you're no longer a human, and you can't regain that either. You got to try to come to terms with what you've done, but you can't regain your humanity when you destroy it. That don't make you a human. That makes you a creature. That makes you no different than Ted Bundy, but much worse in many ways, right? Distribution of 129 iodine around West Valley in New York is absurd to suggest, which is another fuel reprocessing place in New York that was closed after a few years, and to suggest that 129 is what we should be talking about is an insult. It's an actual insult because of the emissions that came out of that place. It's an insult to use iodine, which is really bad, by the way, to use 129 iodine. Most powerful nuclear detonation carried out by the Americans was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki plutonium bombs going off at one time. 1,000. So they said there's 2,200 nuclear weapons detonated. Just one of them are equal to 2,200 Hiroshima's Nagasaki-sized bombs. It's the same. It's the same as a nuclear war. It's the same radioactive fallout. So when you hear me talking about has the nuclear industry betrayed humanity, this is what I'm alluding to. I might have to go and get. I might have to go grab my throat cough syrup because my throat's shut. Let me see if I can cool it down. I'm going to play a video. Get that under control, and I'll be back in 60 seconds. How good is that? I'll play a clip of people that scare me. And if you understood how much they hated you, it would scare you too. And the person that's speaking is Kathleen Higley. She's a doctor. And she's on all kinds of radiation boards. And she's the one that's going to lie to you and lie to you about the effects of radiation for the media and the governments. That's her job. Her job, same as everybody there, their job is to lie to you. And this is how they do it. This is probably one of the most important videos you'll ever watch if you're trying to understand how does it work? How does the lies work? This is it.
When I was trying to pull this talk together, not only will I sort of get a little philosophical about the impacts and the like and try to put things in context, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about who are these radiation experts that get trotted out in events like this or that get to participate in various activities and analysis to make pronouncements about is something safe or not safe. And if you look, you'll see organizations that are often represented, the ICRP, International Commission on Radiological Protection, a premier organization. You'll see UNSCEAR and ERPA. So UNSCEAR is the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. ERPA, the International Radiation Protection Association. The IAEA and some of its folks, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Our own US NCRP. And then there are a number of other organizations. So there's PAHO, there's the Health Physics Society, there's World Health Organization. All of these will bring in, as necessary, experts to speak to you on issues related to radiation protection, radiation safety, and impacts. But if you go a little deeper and you start looking at these organizations, the ICRP, for example, very well known. It's been operating nearly 100 years, not quite. Main commission, 10 people. It's got 5 standing committees. So it's 100-ish folks. I lead one of the 5 committees. If you look at the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation that looked at the effects from Chernobyl, from Fukushima, from other areas, and that has about 30, roughly, countries that are represented in that group. If you start teasing through these pictures, you're going to see the same people on every one of those organizations. So the same people from ICRP are on UNSCEAR, they're in ERPA. If you look at the NCRP, again, the US organization that advises the country on radiation protection issues, it's 100 people, a lot of gray-haired 100 people. And most of them are part of UNSCEAR, are part of ERPA, are part of ICRP, participate in IAEA. So the result, or the real world, is that there's not that many folks that really do radiation safety, radionuclide transport, dose calculations, all of this in the world. It's a pretty small club. And we wear 20 hats. Today I put on 3 pens, and I could put on a whole bunch more. But Health Physics Society, ICRP, Certified Health Physicist, I've got NCRP on there, I've done IAEA. And so the point is, we're a small group, you should cherish us. So
They didn't want to laugh. They had to laugh or she would eat them. She wears a lot of paper suits. If you heard me laughing, that's what I was laughing at. I sat down. She wears a lot of hats, is what she was going to say, but James is familiar with it. She wears a lot of paper suits. That was funny as shit, man. So the Castle Bravo, it was a 5,000 square mile in the Marshall Islands, was lethal dose, which was, they weren't expecting it. They were just demons. The nuclear industry is just demons. Declassified Russian footage of the largest nuclear bomb was 3,800 Hiroshimas going off at the one time. That's a nuclear war. But Dana, there's only 2,200 bombs detonated, but that was equal to 3,800. And if you think Hiroshima is not a big nuclear, you need to go look at the pictures and documentation and fix that shit. 350 nuclear bombs and ongoing suffering and shameful history of nuclear testing in Australia and the Pacific. United Kingdom went to Australia. Not only did they blow the place to shit, they waited for the wind to blow across the country before they set off the nuclear weapons. There was one bomb 1,200 miles away in Adelaide. It was 90,000 counts per minute of gamma. But they detonated over 700 dirty bombs where they wrapped up uranium, plutonium, and conventional explosives and set it off. And then told them to get lost when they asked, what the hell have you got done to us? The secondary sex ratio in Italy over the past 80 years and the impact of radiological contamination after atmospheric nuclear testing in Chernobyl. So they showed that had changed the sex ratio of the males and females to more males than females. And then that's going to be true for the species, which means less population, less production, right? And it starts that chain of extinction. The Keystone disaster, the largest nuclear disaster you never heard of. And there's a lot of that hidden secrets. Years ago, I used to show the documentation. I got no idea what I got done with it, but it's there somewhere, of 7,500 little tiny communities, villages or whatever, were abandoned, but it took them a long time before they finally drove them out of there. But these was along the Tetra River, and everything from the Keystone, which is now known as Mayak, which is absurd. It's absurd releases. So when I say, a list of civilian nuclear accidents, when you start putting, like I'm showing you all of this, and start putting that into the calculator, in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, when you look at all the detonations that follow from that, when you look at all the dumping, look to Britain's nuclear veterans in the eye, Prime Minister, and tell them that they're imagining all the diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries, and that was passed on to their loved ones and their children and their children and their children. Shocking state of the world's riskiest nuclear waste site. And if you notice the picture, it's surrounded by farms. Almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms and reprocessing facilities, so they can move the fallout from close by to keep the background levels down. That's a built-in cleanup mechanism. It's surrounded disease factory with farms so they can poison you thousands of miles away. That's why they done that. That's why they done that. So when I ask you, did the nuclear industry betray humanity? That's one of the attributes that I'm alluding to. All the milk, the chickens, the golf courses, the schools, the playgrounds, the sidewalks, forever contaminated. You can never get rid of it. Rocky Flats, the FBI, CIA had to go in there and close it down. There were just monsters, real life monsters, what they done. And they got away with it, but they closed it down because it was, you guys are crazy. I think that's how they put it, something like that. Hanford cleanup, like it's absurd how much money they've already blown on trying to clean up Hanford. You can't clean it up. But they expect it to be at least another $700 billion minimum. $700 billion. And they dumped 400, and they're not talking about the 450 billion gallons they dumped in the soil. It's hard to visualize 450 billion gallons. You can just, 450 billion gallons. If you took a aquarium 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, and wrapped it around the entire planet, that's 450 billion gallons. So when I ask you, has the nuclear industry betrayed humanity? That's what I'm talking about. Russia's Arctic nuclear dump may become a promising fishing area. There's 18,000 dumps. There's actually 18, including submarines, full of reactor fuel, scuttled. They produced studies then and claimed that even in 1,000 years, the hulls of the rusted nuclear submarine won't breach. Well, first off, the reactor is under pressure, and every 33 feet has got an extra 14.5 pounds per square inch applied to it. There's no way it's not going to be compromised. And that's the same thing when you put the 45-gallon barrels they throw into the ocean. Like Britain, for 3 decades, 30 years, drove around throwing 45-gallon drums over. They collapse on the way down from the pressure. And that if you get an EMP from the sun, all the reactors will melt down at the same time. Mortality among the U.S. military participants at 8 above-ground nuclear weapons test series. Yeah, and then everybody else worldwide, and all the birds and insects, mammals and animals too. And that all nuclear power plants release liquid batches of radioactive waste into the ocean because there's no checks and balances. They control the regulatory agencies. The little secrets of nuclear power at the bottom of the landfill. I can't possibly get through it all. And they just eat all your money for your hospitals and your schools and your infrastructure and your healthcare. They just eat all that money and they steal it. 90% of it goes to administration. 10% of it actually goes into getting the job done. Think about that statement. There is no checks. Don't worry, though. You can go back to Donneray nuclear site in about 300 years. So when you think about the longevity of this stuff, the toxicity of this stuff, has the nuclear industry betrayed humanity? It's actually being pretty polite. I'm being pretty polite. The homeless and the migrant workers exploited to clean up the nuclear meltdowns, think Fukushima radiation. The nuclear meltdowns. Call it what it is. Stop being cowards. Stop hiding behind grammar. Downwinders impacted by the nuclear testing can apply for compensation. Entire states, everybody's in it, is entitled to compensation from radioactive fallout. How is that not betraying humanity? There's nothing betrayed humanity more than the nuclear industry. In fact, if you compile everything else, it still can't put a freaking dent in what the nuclear industry done. And there's lots of toxicity everywhere else. But nuclear is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Do you get it yet? You will, I can assure you. In 1986, the Russian submarine with 27 nuke-tart missiles sank and exploded. Exploded. Look up the words sometime. The Soviet Union detonated a nuclear bomb to put out a burning gas well. So when you look at look at the initiative, you said, let's find the most reckless people and put them in charge. And I can't get through it all. Waltz Mill meltdown, the atomic history of Christmas Island, where they detonated and radiated. And the women that have babies there, they call them jelly babies. They don't look like babies. They have to bury them right away. And again, the A-10 warthogs only shoot dirty bombs that have already gone through a chain reaction. The epitome of stupid, the very epitome of stupid is using radiological materials in munitions. That's the epitome of I'm a moron or I'm a scumbag. The Americans, I'll give you context. Americans, a couple of years ago, what year was this? 2019, hired a company to get rid of 35.7 million rounds of depleted uranium munitions because they had bigger and better ones produced for the same weapons. Could you get rid of these 36 million dirty bombs for us? Yeah, sure, right away. Like those kinds of stories right there should terrify you. That should terrify you. That's why we have this poll tonight. It's an incredibly important poll. Has the nuclear industry betrayed humanity? It's not a very difficult question. There's only one answer. There really is. Nuclear official confirms explosion at Fukushima number 3. Well, that's very nice of you. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Finally. I was listening to Elton John, Tiny Dancer, and he was about 22 years old when he's singing it tonight to console myself. As I was putting the show together, I was getting upset. And then the only way to switch was to go find something that was incredible instead of insidiously evil to balance out what I was doing. And unfortunately, I can't do that here because YouTube won't let me. That's how I manage sometimes, is I'll find things that are not evil when I'm putting this together, because otherwise I start to lose my mind, right? That's Reactor 3 detonating, by the way. It's hard to appreciate it because it's shot like 30 miles away, but that's actually the fuel pools and the reactor core falling back down to Earth. So when they said he confirmed an explosion at Reactor 3, first off, you can't go near this place again. Look at it. There's fuel pellets everywhere. These are lethal doses everywhere, the entire site. You know how many nuclear scientists volunteered to go there? None. Ever. Korea went there and they're so scared. They went there to tell a lie, but they're so scared that they don't have any input. Like, we're going to defer our findings. What do you mean? You went down there all piss and vinegar, going to get to the bottom of it. Now you're like, now you got to go home, suck your thumb in a corner with a flashlight in the dark again, right? Like the rest of us. There's no irony in that statement, is it? Yeah, Reactor 3 exploded. Confirmed. No shit. Which was the mixed oxide one. That was like all of them. That kind of toxicity is, man, that's some kind of evil right there. Nuclear radiation could spread to the United States. Really? I never thought about that. That's amazing. You sure? Are you sure? You're sure? And this was one of the models. The bottom right-hand corner is based on 468 hours, 19.5 days, and covers the whole planet, not just America. These are not. Now what covered it, right? Was it a meltdown? Well, that don't look like a meltdown to me, my humble opinion. That's reactor 3 and reactor 4. That's the ejection. It's complete loss of all the inventories. It dwarfs Chernobyl. And Chernobyl is nothing to sneeze at, but in actual comparison, Chernobyl is like a paper towel. And Chernobyl is not a paper towel. And if you go to the orphanages down there, the disfigured and unwanted and abandoned children and chunks of flesh that look like children in some ways, you get it. Officials presuming that 2 nuclear reactors have now had meltdowns. Well, it's hard to understand because you got a country that just got torn apart for 1,300 miles, so it's pretty easy to forget that a single meltdown surpasses all of that misery and carnage. But it really does. Nuclear plant designer Tokyo is suppressing information. The same plant designers are now out there helping them fake it. A serious meltdown, highly likely. I think the whole world, including the industry, was in shock, but they got it together pretty quick, thanks to Britain and Canada and a few other countries working digitally to misinform you, to manipulate you, to deceive you. The radioactive cloud hits U.S. aircraft carrier. It doesn't do it justice, right? So all of their digital watches stopped at about the same time from radioactive fallout. And so, appropriately, when you get that much radiation, you would expect to see all the bathrooms. I know this is a little difficult to think about, but all the bathrooms were plugged up from diarrhea from radiation sickness, and they were defecating in the hallways because the bathrooms were, for lack of a better phrase, unapproachable. It was, when all your digital watches stop at the same time, and they were denied compensation. Because then you got to admit nuclear could be bad. So you always got to deny compensation, otherwise nuclear gets a black eye. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. 30 million that we know about. Some estimates were 60 million. 30 million one-ton bags. You put a one-ton bag in the back of a 20-foot pickup truck, bumper to bumper, around the planet 5 times. So you got 5 rows of traffic of one-ton bags wrapped around the entire planet, continuously. Which is just a fraction of the radioactive fallout. There's only 3% of the land we're talking about. They can't clean up the forest, they can't clean up the mountains, they can't clean up the lakes, the rivers, the estuaries, the streams, and everything else, where a lot of this washes down to repeatedly. The radioactive pollen the country produces alone is a catastrophic event worldwide every year. Radioactive releases may continue for a year or more, even after fission is stopped. Yeah, I wish it was only a year or more. They were just breaking it to you gently, right? Radiation around Fukushima near levels where humans vomit uncontrollably and hair can be stripped from the body. Humans vomit uncontrollably and hair can be stripped from the body. So it wasn't just the ships, right? And we've listened to presentations from Harvard talking about these. These are lethal doses. They're going to die shortly after. And there was around 3,000 of them that died shortly after. The nuclear industry blamed it on stress, but my rebuttal to it is that we've seen hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones where millions and millions and millions of people evacuated. We've never seen mass die-off from evacuation before or after. That was the only time. So wouldn't it be more prudent to put that into conversation? When you can't go back to your community ever, and you got to depend upon, like when you look at this picture, that's their whole heart and soul they put into these shops. All right, they got everything into it. They probably borrowed money from their loved ones to keep it until it made a profit and everything else. You can't go back to your community. You can't go back. You abandon your banks, which were robbed, by the way. You abandoned your jewelry stores. You abandoned your car lots, your malls, your schools, your universities, your billion-dollar hospitals. You abandoned it because it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in sunshine and sleeping next to somebody, which is what they tell you, right? It's a pun on reality. Worse than a meltdown, the spent fuel pools catches fire. Japan Power Company, spent fuel pool catches fire. You're talking decades and decades of reactor cores. So the spent fuel pools are equal to each of them. There's 2 at the top of each building. I estimated quite a few years ago, we actually had hard numbers. We went through the math and I shared it with everybody. And it was around 30 Chernobyls per fuel pool was my numbers back then. It's much more wickeder now because of better grasp on it, right? And pre-Fukushima, we didn't have a lot of source material on meltdowns, right? And this is the only time in history we see that we know of, because we don't really know what's going on in the world, what they hid away already. But this was a well-publicized, and we have thousands and thousands of pictures. So we're in the ballpark when we talk about figures. Everybody got their paper suits? Let's roll. Nuclear engineer, far more radioactivity inside of spent fuel ponds, and which I despise the name pond used in that context, because a pond is something we covet, right? It should be pool. They have no attributes of a pond whatsoever. Then in the reactors, could very well produce damage greater than Chernobyl. And so to say you can produce more damage than Chernobyl when it's pure uranium, pure plutonium, Chernobyl was graphite, and how can you be a nuclear engineer and not understand these nuances, these minutiae, these details of details? How does that actually work? It's a crime just to be right there and take that picture. That's a brutal dose. So to work in that environment is a major insult to your body, to your genetics, to your DNA, to your chromosomes, to your cells. Radioactivity is being released directly into the atmosphere. That's one of the rare times the International Atomic Energy Agency actually told the truth. Probably the only time, I think, isn't it? I'm not trying to be funny, I'm just saying. AP journalists felt the explosion from number 3 reactor 25 miles away. And, next time you're out and you're driving, mark 25 miles and then say, this is where I would have felt the explosion from my home. And you'll appreciate the enormity, because I've done that. Would be like Chernobyl on steroids. Such an important one right here. Each reactor holds 3,450 spent fuel assemblies. That's the buildings or the pools, or a combination. I'm still not 100% sure because the industry's so secretive. And we got the documentation showing that the pools were stuffed with more than is considered acceptable. Because they don't have a repository anywhere in the country or anywhere on the planet, right? So it's kept in the so-called pools. They're looking for bodies. They're crying for bodies. Australian forecast maps showed possible radioactivity east of Los Angeles by March the 18th. That's 7 days after. So much suffering. You got 1 million buildings. It's hard to care about one or two, right? Just ran through there like a meteorite. Mountain of debris 20 meter tall in Miyagi. Hot white vapors rising. This is radioactive. Miyagi is a nuclear wasteland. It was abandoned for 12 years, so it's a mountain of radioactive fallout too. Like, I get it, but I'm heartbroken. And when the tsunami happened, I actually put out a video and warned people about the tsunami in desperation that there might have been a single person out there, because I was quite popular back then, and I've been censored to almost non-existent since. Radiation forecast can by no means be released to the public. And there's a whole lot of stories over a period of time that showed up about that. So this was a tsunami map from NOAA. And the nuclear industry proliferated that out there and said, oh my God, this is Fukushima. And when people came in concerned and because they didn't know the difference, they mocked them and said, come on, stupid. It's just a tsunami map. But NOAA actually did produce a radioactive fallout map on the 30th of March 2011. That was to your right. So both of these are NOAA's. The real one was hid away, and they perpetrated the one to your left so they could ridicule you and try to denigrate you. And that some of these examples are extraordinary, where in Taiwan there was 2,200 nuclear students that every day during class was on the internet putting propaganda like that out there, challenging people in the comment sections of every story that were concerned by saying it's like a banana on a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. Probably one of the most hideous things I've ever read and heard about was that all these students, in order to become nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, nuclear engineers, were immediately thrown in the deep end. And they get out there and disarm the population so they don't protect themselves, because you need a paycheck for the rest of your life in the nuclear industry. So you need to learn that they're scum and only you matter. Because that's what it tells you, right? Can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or pick it up or touch it. High radiation forces withdrawal of workers trying to restore power. Well, the tsunami took out 1,300 miles of the coastline. Can't restore power. All the telephone poles are missing. The buildings were blown up. Let me show you it. I'm talking about restoring power. It's March the 18th. On March the 18th, that's what reactor 3 and 4 looked like. How are you going to restore power to it? This was the relentless propaganda, the unmitigated propaganda, the vicious, hateful propaganda was in overdrive. You can't go back to your community, but nuclear is like a banana. Do you get it? Yeah. Nuclear is like walking in the sunshine. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags, not of sunshine, but of radiation. Top U.S. nuclear official raised the possibility of widespread nuclear fallout caused by spent fuel pools melting down. Well, they did melt down. There's no possibilities. This is incontestable, unassailable, that this has happened and is still happening today. Nuclear emergency warning for United States of America issued by aviation regulators. And Anchorage, they're expecting up to a severe dose in children because they consume so much milk, right? By aviation regulators. Anchorage included affected flight information. So the airplanes were warned about radioactive plumes. Nuclear emergency warning issued for 10 aerospace regions. March the 15th, 2011. Like, think about that statement. Think about that. Like, denying this happened is proof that you're stupid. That's, to those who deny it, that means they're actually stupid. It's not a bad thing to be stupid. I wish I was stupid. That would be so awesome. I wouldn't have to live this nightmare every day when I wake up. I really do live in Groundhog's Day. Would you abandon your Cadillacs because of a coal plant breaking down or an oil plant breaking down or a gas plant breaking down? Forecast map of radioactive clouds shows threat to the U.S. west coast of America. There was so much. Originally, there was a lot of brave journalists and academics that spoke up, but they got replaced by scumbags. And now you're kind of stuck with me. My apologies. Let me show you another map of the radioactive fallout from France. So you can articulate. This model is based on 16 days of radioactive fallout. 16 days. I think it is, yeah. Now this one is based on 30 days. But if I go back here to 20 days, that's 20 days later of radioactive fallout. 20 days. It's a model from France. And that model is backed up by other models. And wasted some water on my keyboards. Way to go, Dana. That's backed up by another Francis model. This was the same IRS and French government shown 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima fallout of cesium-137 in the plume. This is day 9. It's March the 19th, I think, 18th. So this is only 7 days. So let's bring it together. Here's another model of another isotope from the same government agency, of a different isotope, released to the public. And we're day 18, 19, day 20, and so day 20 right there. And so if you go for 30 days, is there anywhere on the planet where you're not going to be ingesting radioactive fallout, where it's not going to be there for the rest of your life, pulsing energy at the speed of light, wrecking everything? No. The evidence is so overwhelming now. I think the world recognizes it at this stage. Like the key players is what I'm talking about. Because you don't have to. You really got to affect the policymakers and the investors, the shareholders, so to speak. to change something like on this scale. And they don't have, the people that they're going to typically get fed are the propaganda machines that we despise, right? And so eventually they're going to come across me because, like it or not, I'm out there constantly, year after year or two. And we encompass an absurd amount of variety of research, both on the ground and through the internet, for instance. But we do physical research, and we cover vast areas, and we pay attention. Details is everything, right? Would you abandon all your cars because your gas plant broke down or your oil plant broke down because you had some carbon there? High radiation levels around the plant prevented helicopters from dumping water on the reactors. High radiation. So if the helicopters can't go there, how could people go there? How could the Fukushima 50 go there? How do you think well-adjusted that child is going to be when they hit 20 years of age? Forecast map of radioactive fallout shows the threat to the west coast, U.S. west coast. Well, you can't do it to the U.S. west coast. It has to be the whole planet. This was a model of plutonium-239 dispersion that covers the entire planet. These models are about 26 days of radioactive fallout, and it doesn't stop at 26 days. That model did, but the radioactive fallout don't. U.S. official fear of Fukushima to be deadly for decades. It would be hard to describe how alarming it is. Not really. It's actually quite easy to describe it. Right, the vagueness is not accidental. Radiation is streaming into the atmosphere after number 4 fuel pool boiled dry in a fire. United Kingdom paper, Daily Mail. And I'll give you a picture. Because you know what a picture is. A picture is 1,000 words, or in this case, 1,000 curses. Yeah, the fuel pool looks like it's boiled dry to me, Georgie. It should be at least 120 feet above the wreckage or the stump to the left. And by the way, the people to the right, the media is to the right, are all pretending they're in the fuel pool. The fuel pool actually doesn't even exist. So therefore, it didn't happen, Dana. But it did, though. And the results are stunning. The results are just... It's disappointing. It's heartbreaking. I get it, though. Whenever I look at these pictures, man, do I ever get it. I get it. You got 1,300 miles of the coastline, and the struggle is real, right? It's not a game. All of the stricken reactors spent fuel contain plutonium, and we're talking about, they emit to 2%, right? So that's, in a building, that would be 21,000 pounds plutonium, and there's, it's not there, so they lost at least that much in that building. Unfortunately, the other buildings look similar. And now that we know at least 4 buildings are that, so you're talking 80,000. These are absurd numbers of amount of plutonium. When pre-Fukushima, 2 kilograms was considered enough to jeopardize the future of humanity, released into the biosphere. Entire communities washed away, and how did that tragedy not affect you, right? How does that not? But it's easy to disregard 4 buildings when entire communities are washed away. I get that. Right, but the nuclear academics are aware of everything I'm telling you. They lie to you. It's like a banana and a potato chip for 80 years. And they can't tell you the truth because the industry can't exist if you do. Radioactive fallout now reached Southern California. Southern California. I got the luxury of hindsight, and I get that. But this is cesium-137, 134, and then 5 times 131 iodine, gas and particulates. Disposition. And that's 1,000 becquerels a square meter. Again, when you add it all up, and stuff like this just blows me away. It's just so heartbreaking. And now the industry's done it to everybody. Fukushima nuclear plume covered most of the North America. Now over the North Atlantic, the Caribbean, the Canadian East Coast. This was a model from Neptunium-239, which, by the way, decays to plutonium-239. And plutonium-239 is considered the worst of the plutoniums. And you got to abandon your equity, abandon your graveyards, abandon your community, abandon your soul, basically. Fukushima reactors will have to be entombed, radioactive and deadly for thousands of years. Imagine 1,300 miles of that. 1,300 miles of that, but the 4 nuclear plants are going to create more carnage over the long term. Cesium plume forecast for North America and Europe up to March the 24th, France's IRSN. And I showed you that depictions earlier. I can bring it again if you give me a second. This one's only based on 7 days, right? But that's the West Coast, right? That line right here, that's the West Coast. That's only 7 days, though. And you're talking about 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima nuclear meltdown, the cesium-137, 134. It's significant, right? They picked up 30 million one-ton bags of plutonium, uranium, and all the other stuff. No bananas, no potato chips. Actual radiation followed. The common spent fuel pool was at ground level, the same level as reactor 3 and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. It was right behind reactor 4. And I actually got pictures of it, reactor, or the common spent fuel pool, immediately after. Let me see if I can dig them up. Abracadabra. Aliwababulaya. Abracadabra. Abracadabra. Cadabra, abra. I'll get there. Hang on, bear with me. Get there in a few minutes. Have a little snooze while you're waiting. Oh. Ooh, what have we got? Oh. I think. First off, right alongside of reactor 4 is a stump, the ghost of reactor 3, I guess. Those pillars you see hanging down, you can actually turn an SUV around on them. It's so very, very difficult. So very difficult a lot of times to get context. Let me see if I can give you some context. How big, and wide, and tall this is. It may take a second or two. And it might never happen. I might not find it. I might just move on. Oh, no. I guess it might not happen after all. I thought it was right there. And I got it in 2 or 3 places so I can find it, but by golly, I got it. So that's going to go around one of the reactors. So when you look at it, it's still hard to appreciate how big it is. It's 190 feet tall, 150 feet wide, 19 stories tall. And this is the very bottom section. That's the very bottom section. 871, here we go. So when you see that, it's hard to understand how big it is, right? Because that's what it takes to go around that building. Which, that one's usually the number 1, but number 1 is the exact same width and height originally of this one here, which is the mixed oxide fuel facility. And those pillars, those beams, you can actually turn a large SUV. It might be an 8-point turn or something. You can turn it around on that. That's how big they actually are. And there's nothing left of it. Okay, so that was right alongside, that is right alongside of Reactor 4, which is right here. And right beyond Reactor 4 up there is the common spent fuel pool. This is where they put extra assemblies from the fuel reactor cores from all 6 reactors will get stored there, but they don't have a repository, so that was stuffed. The fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings are stuffed, and that's the stump of Reactor 3. And these pictures, I got a few of them to show you, just 6 of them to show you, but these pictures were taken immediately after the tsunami meltdowns, and they were released on the 10th anniversary. I found it in a Japanese or a Chinese story. When I translated it, sometimes it's not very, they were talking about these pictures that were released. And so they had a link to TEPCO. I downloaded all the pictures. And originally, you can't see this. Originally, because it's a drone, you're way up in the air. And so I said, wow, these are pretty big files. I should be able to zoom in. So when I zoomed in, this is the pictures I extracted. Everything was redacted. There were 763 of them. I actually done a presentation on all of them. And I was stunned when I seen Reactor 3's redacted, Reactor 4's redacted. But up there, I said, that's the common spent fuel pool, I think. And so as you zoom in on it, everything is completely redacted. But behind it, it'll give you some context. You see in the top, very top of it? They're transport truck containers. That gives you context. But why did they redact the carbon spent fuel pool? So back to the original headline was 6,375 spent fuel assemblies. Let's come over to the calculator, and I'll bring it up on the screen so we can all have some fun. Well, I don't know what I'm doing here. Bear with me. 6,375. 6,375. Now each fuel assembly has 100 fuel rods with 18 pounds each rod is, and there's 100 of them, so times 1,800. And so the spent fuel pool that they emit to, with 6,375 assemblies, is 11 million pounds. And we know they were stuffed with double or triple. And the spent fuel pool building is completely redacted in the pictures. But you had to zoom in to see that. You couldn't see that from the original 763 pictures. When you were zooming in, you were like, what the shit am I looking at? Well, it wasn't just that. The Reactor 6 was redacted too. Seems I'm here. Let me see if I can find that right quick. Yeah, I'm there. I'm right there. Here we go. We'll get it. And so when I zoomed in on Reactor 5 and 6, and I'll show it to you in a second, to my horror, to my unbelievable horror, Reactor 6 was redacted too. Here we go. So this was, by the way, on the way in between 1, 2, 3, and 4, north of it, is Reactor 5 and 6 is up there. But in between that, at sea level, right at sea level, is the cash storage. And we cover it in great detail in a 6-video series, is in a playlist of 1,900 pictures that were released by TEPCO after a couple of years, and they show you pictures inside. The building was, and now just before you can see the pressure of the ocean too, right? Collapsed these massive tanks. By the way, they dumped 1.4 million of these tanks of radioactive sludge into the soil at Hanford. So when I started zooming in on Reactor 5 and 6, which is what you're looking at, number 6 is the farthest one, I said, my God, that's redacted. So was the stack, and so was the pump house. That was released with no explanation on the 10th anniversary. So that was a warning, right? There was somebody there who had a pains of conscience, and they released it. And Chinese media picked it up, and I have such a pathetic life that I translated it, and then I went and downloaded the pictures when I realized, holy shit, this is a gold mine. That's how pathetic I am. I'm out there translating shit about Fukushima to kill my day, and I do this all the time. But without that, nobody's ever showed you those pictures. Nobody. You saw that Chinese, they didn't show you the pictures, they linked you to it. Nobody's ever done a presentation that I know about and walk you through that. Nobody on the entire planet. Like a lot of the stuff, obviously. Nobody's ever done it. I'm the first one to ever do it. Provide you with the actual documentation. So I apologize for that, because I know how traumatic that could be. And each reactor holds 3,000, the spent fuel pool holds double that, and each reactor holds 3,450 spent fuel assemblies. But these are pure uranium, pure plutonium, and in the case of Reactor 3, it's the mixed oxide fuel, which is the high assay industrial military grade fuel known as MOX fuel, and is lethal. It's unbelievably lethal. And where am I to here? Yeah, it was, wow. I'm still seasick from today. That was pretty rough. Comes with the territory. It's pretty rough on you anyway. It's not a very nice feeling, let's put it that way. Strong winds threaten Tokyo with more radiation Monday and Tuesday. There's an understatement of the year. Anyway, I was putting this together tonight. I was like, well, I'm going to tell this story because I have headlines from the day and yesterday I was going to cover. And as I'm trying to do the preamble, I sometimes I get mesmerized by the documentation and I start freaking with it. This is not the first time I've done this, so the regulars know this is just the way it works sometimes. You abandon everything because it's not like a banana. Surface forecast shows radioactive Xenon-133 lingering over Florida. Right, and I really don't know what they're talking about when I hear that, because I'll show you a xenon model of, that was just 19 or 20 days of fallout of Xenon-133. So it's not just over Florida, it's over the planet, and over the next couple of weeks it covers the rest of the planet. So imagine how bad ground zero is. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. Dawn at Fukushima, May 11th, looking back, smoke and steam billowing from reactor buildings 2, 3, and 4. Because number 1 is already gone in the sky, and then the fuel reactor core has gone China syndrome into the earth, along with reactor 2. And this is, you don't want to be that close, trust me. But officially, there's 4,000 people there working, but unofficially, there's 50. Unofficially, there's not even that. When you can't go back to your shops 60, 70 miles away, how many more hints do you need? Like, really, right? How many times you got to walk in front of a car and get knocked down before you realize that's a bad idea? Once? How many times you got to have nuclear accidents before you realize this is a bad idea? Rapid meltdown happened at reactor 2 and 3, indicated by the black smoke. Reactor 2, again, right? Number 2. Because that's important, because they're soon going to claim to be getting fuel out of reactor 2 and reactor 1, right? This year they're going to claim to get fuel out of reactor 1, they claim. You had the whole country being torn apart, and I get that. And so the nuclear industry never wasted a crisis, took advantage of humanity. Reactor 3 was much nearer to 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, now we know in hindsight. So you know what they're saying there? When the man with the fuel rod in his hand drops dead, pick up the fuel rod and start running. Everybody got your paper suits on? Let's roll. Now, paper suits can't protect you. They don't give them paper suits at Hanford. Neutron beams seen 13 times at Fukushima. Maybe it's evidence of nuclear fission or the release of plutonium. Now, there's a release of plutonium, all right. Smoke and steam rising from all 4 reactors. That's why they abandoned their Plinko machines all over that part of the country, see? Neutrons are emitted during a nuclear chain reaction. There's a nuclear chain reaction feared at the spent fuel pool. That was March the 24th. Now, we know at March the 24th, the fuel pools were long gone. They were sayonara by then. That's why you abandon your communities and your inventories and your livelihoods. Neutron beams suggest uranium plutonium leaked. Does it look like there's anything leaking out of the remains of these massive buildings? Does it look like it's leaking or hemorrhaged out of there immediately? Or just got tossed out of there? Neutron beams seen 13 times at Fukushima. Among everything else, the country was in chaos. It's total chaos. Possibility of radiation from the MOX fuel in the reactor combination uranium-plutonium could be released. MOX fuel from reactor 3, you say? Do tell. Let's have a look at reactor 3, because hey, I'm curious. So reactor 3 is to your left. There's only at best, there's not even 1/3 of it left. It's about 1/4 of it left. The fuel was at the top of the building. So unless there's some serious technology that keeps everything invisible, I'd say it's gone, right? Like they are, unfortunately. Melted fuel in reactor 3 appears to have burned through the pressure vessels. What pressure vessels? What are you talking about? So what they done was they engineered a contraption off-site and installed it and then claimed that they were in the fuel pool getting the fuel out of the pool to your right. When in reality, they just engineered that on top of the stump. See? They're not very dishonest, are they? Authorities hid the radioactive plume forecast to avoid evacuation, so they wouldn't lose their jobs. You can't go back to your community, but it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine and getting on an airplane and climbing mountains and peanut butter. They ran away and abandoned their animals and pets and left them to starve to death and die of thirst. Because it's like a banana, see? No end in sight for radioactive releases at Fukushima. International Atomic Energy Agency. Let me repeat that again. No end in sight for radioactive releases at Fukushima. Currently, they're down there. Everything's in the tanks. Nothing got out. Don't listen to Durnford. Bastard Durnford. Every time the nuclear industry hears my name, they spit on the floor and say he's a piece of shit. Fearmonger. This is right after this tsunami. Everything's smothering. It's so horrible, isn't it? It's heartbreaking. Every time I see it, and I've been doing this a long time, it never stops affecting me. TEPCO lost the race to save the planet Earth. Which TEPCO's not a decommissioning authority. It should have been the world nuclear industry should have responded, not TEPCO. The reason TEPCO exists is so you don't blame the nuclear industry. TEPCO had no right ever setting foot on the site again. No right ever having input again. This was a catastrophic event for humanity and the 8 million species. Has the nuclear industry betrayed humanity? Now, some of you are saying they got to have humanity to betray it, but I don't know if that's 100% true, but I kind of got to agree with you, I suppose. Radioactivity at 10 million times the usual levels. Number 2, workers evacuated, not from Unit 2, but from the plant. This picture was an oil refinery, had a fire. But they were storing depleted uranium on the site. It was 1,800 pounds or kilograms, I can't remember. And that's what's burning. Radioactive particles be concentrated over the Midwest. Actually, NOAA put out an airborne radioactive fallout dispersal model based on 40 days. I got it at 200% of their speed for time constraints because it's pretty long if we do it the other way. But this is based on 137 and iodine 131 radioactive fallout over 40 days. When the model stops, that's 40 days. But it's only based on venting. It's not based on the actual nuclear meltdowns and the loss of the inventories. But nevertheless, it's significant. It's still significant. Imagine doing 1,300 miles of the coastline like that. because that's what happened. Smoke at another disease factory, Japan nuclear plant run by scumbag TEPCO. And this was the Kishawashi Kariwa nuclear complex. And also the Daini, right? So there's multiple reactors probably melted down at other sites. They managed to cover that up. The Daini is a real candidate for that one because that was a twin. The smoke seen rising from another nuclear plant 10 kilometers away was the Fukushima Daini, which was the number 2 plant. And that was exact replica of number 1 plant. It was at the same sea level, and it was right at ground zero. And we have all kinds of documentations we've covered over the years about it. Had major damage, submerged under 4 meters of water. Uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction may be coming from the melted fuel in number 1, International Atomic Energy Agency. They got rid of all of those people. So much mud in reactor 1, it's preventing water from getting into the core. No, the building blew up, detonated. The emissions now was you can't get near the building. There was 1 million sieverts outside of that building. Unusual amount of smoke billowing from reactor 3 and 4. Nothing to be concerned about, said TEPCO. That was on the 14th when buildings were detonating, right? I'll show you what it looked like on the 14th. TEPCO, nothing to worry about. Don't listen to the fearmongers. Maybe I'm not going to show you a picture. There's a certain picture I thought I was going to show you. We already showed it multiple times. It was shortly after the tsunami, but my brain is finally, because I'm in the wrong pain. We won't worry about it. We won't worry about it. So I got one little video for you. That's the show for tonight. And we raised, James Lewis had donated 400, which is absolutely amazing. We got bad weather coming up for the next number of days, so we're going to try to get something accomplished, either the truck or the boat. And we got another 130 anonymous donation. And we're so desperate now to get, so much broken down. It's not going to hurt me to we've been on the ocean for 5 days out of the last 6 days. I put fuel in the boat today, but I didn't go overboard with it just in case the weather got nasty and we needed money to try to repair stuff. So that was smart, thank goodness, finally. So this afternoon, I just seen a whale. I just turned around, and I'm hit under land quite a long ways away from where I left. I got to make it back, and I come around the corner, and I realized the wind has changed and picked up, and now it's blown straight in off the Atlantic Ocean. It's hard to appreciate it, but if I had lots of power, I would zigzag my way out broadside to the wave and then cut across and then just zigzag all the way out, then take a broadside and shoot up the coastline and then take it on the stern, on the quarter, back into port, right? That's how you normally would approach this. So what I had to do was I had to punch my way out and then shoot across it on broadside before it got too nasty, because it's about an hour punch. I'm only going to give you a 2-minute sample of it. It's hard to appreciate it. And then we'll come in and say goodnight. We'll close the poll down. This is the video. I'll adjust the volume for you right quick here. It's 2:30. Wind's picking up. Time to head back anyway. Can't get her over 3,000. Not that you can go over 3,000 anyway. So the idea is to go out a little bit and then make the turn and take it broadside. And that'll make it a lot smoother when we get to that stage. Got about 1.5 miles to go before we get around the point. It's what they call Blow Me Down Head is right here. It's the house is too in there. That's what's known as Blow Me Down Head. And then the next one is Hibbs Hole and Southern Rocks. The tide's coming up. The wind's from the northeast. I'm just going to head in. We seen a whale at the very end of it when I turned around to head out of here. We're over by Cupid's right now. In a very lonely place out here. No traffic at all. Seen around 30 pigeons and 5 cormorants, and so I'm just getting out there, right, and it get worse and worse and worse as you go on out, and then it was by the time I get out there, the wind's still starting to pick up now. By the time I got my stern to it, took it on the stern quarter, the whole way in almost to the wharf. The boat would race on the ground swells, like, because I was doing, say, 12, 14 kilometers, and it would pick up to 17, 18, 19 kilometers in between each swell. It would slow down, and the next ground swell would get behind you. So I'm a little bit out of practice. I got seasick. And started off this morning, I woke up and I was sick and threw up a couple of times. And then settled down and started packing. I left 9 a.m. When I finished up, it was 5 p.m. So I finished up, that was basically 5 hours before I started the show. When I finally got in and got the boat home and backed it up, and it was just exhausted. Like even my arms, like everything was hurting because of the motions. They're getting pounded for about an hour straight. Yeah, the wind caught me off guard. That wasn't supposed to happen till the night for the wind to change. It's the Atlantic. You're out in the middle of the Atlantic. That's you got to expect it, right? All is good. And so I was really happy. We got a great baseline today. I documented most of the coastline that... it was a funny story. I went in to this wharf and... I was looking just to see if I can launch from that spot sometimes, right? Because I didn't know it was there. And it's free to launch at that wharf, but it's quite a ways away from me, all things considered. But it's a great solution anyway. So that made it worth it, to getting beaten. Actually made it worth. So we're going to close the poll down. Throw on some music here. And the outro, Ninth Symphony. Symphony. I'm tired. You know you're tired when you're tired, right? It's okay. We're back at it tomorrow. It just feels like it's going to take a couple of days to recover from this week. That's fine. Let's close the poll. Where are you to, Mr. Paul? Oh yeah, has the nuclear industry betrayed humanity? And it's appropriate nobody voted no, because even the industry can't deny it. And we thank everybody that participated. These polls are special. You know, if you took screen captures of all the polls I've done and made a book out of it, that's quite the weapon. It's quite the educational way to go about it too. Yeah, thank you, James. I'm still rolling from James. She wears a lot of paper suits comment. That was hilarious. Good night, everybody. Let me able to do a shout out for everybody. James Lucid, Albert. Good night, everybody. PBS, John Curtis, another CG. I know Stephen Young is out there. I seen Colette commented earlier. John Shiflett. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night and a great weekend. We're overdue for earthquakes in Japan. Since March, we've been expecting a major earthquake. They have every year, and they haven't had it, so I'm assuming it's going to be really bad when it does show up. Vast Thinker, John Curtis, I already think I showed it out. Nabi. Good night, everybody. I'm looking forward to just stopping. I might just do nothing for 24 hours. Actually, I might go in on the bike tomorrow and look for insects, just go easy. Maybe I got too much work that got to get done, but I should do that for a few hours anyway, probably. Don Vincent, we need to start doing that. We got to get a baseline for 2023. Now's the time to do it. Summer's almost here, but the next week is all northeasterly winds. That might change in a couple of days, right? I hope it does, because they're the worst winds you can get down here. They're also known as Capelin weather, where it brings cloud and fog. And so the capelin can lay their eggs on the beaches and they won't dry up in the hot sun. So it's not a bad thing, it's necessary. But it's highly improbable and even unlikely you would be out in a boat in that kind of wind from that direction, because it comes straight in from the open Atlantic Ocean. So if it turns out to be 4 or 5 days of that wind, we're so lucky to get these 5 days in, right? I mean, every chance we get, we're going to go out. And we're just going to keep going. Beer Bones, good night, everybody. We're almost through. I'm going backwards up through the names to show there's Savannah's fourth. And I'm almost through the top comments. We're coming down to the most recent ones. That's a great way to end the show. There's Colette. I seen Colette back at the beginning there. Did I get everybody? Dana Nasana. I almost missed Dana Nasana tonight. Wow. Good night, Dana. Okay, we got everybody. That was in the comments section. That's just a shout out to those that went the extra step, right? And are active in the chat. And who I absolutely adore, I might add. I love my chat people. Chatty chat. I even love the people that's censoring me. I don't hold a grudge. I just want a future for humanity and the 8 million species. Is that a crime? If that's a crime, well, paint me black. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Or, I'm sorry, Sunday, unless there's an earthquake or important stories. We'll be back on Sunday. We'll play some of the videos on Sunday from today, regardless. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. Thanks, Daryl. Good night, everybody. Take care.